somebody went back and studied, I think, 1,400 wars throughout all of history. And he couldn't find one time that war didn't cause economic problems and inflation. And so you spent too much. In the 60s, it was guns and butter. Don't worry, we can have welfare and the war. And what happened in the 70s? A few of you here probably remember the 70s. High interest rates, a bad economy, a lot of inflation, and so it is very, very costly. The war has been going on now for a good many years, and the American people are tired of it. There's still a large group of Republican Party members who are still, at the point where you can't say anything, you can't be critical. And this is sort of the issue that came up with the confrontation with Giuliani, is that if you say anything about policy, or you say we shouldn't have gone in there, or if you say that we ought to come home, if you say that we question the policy, and they turn it around and they'll say, well, that means you don't support the troops. It's like, you're not dealing, you take it out of the area of policy, and they want to turn it around and throw it back on you and say, well, you're un-American, you're unpatriotic, you don't support the troops. That's very unfair and it's not correct, because you see, the fact that the people who were the strong advisors, in a way there was a takeover of our foreign policy, and many of you in this room know about it, and the neoconservatives aren't conservatives. They took over our foreign policy. And they are the ones that designed the foreign policy. And they're the ones who came from the left. They used to be liberal Democrats, and they believe in the welfare system. So in a way, they went away from the freedom philosophy. They pick up the philosophy that welfareism and socialism and things like that in the domestic area are proper, as well as we have this aggressive foreign policy where we tell other people how to live and how they have to live like we do because we're good. So they play on the part, yes, we do have good values. I mean, I wouldn't be living here and I wouldn't be bragging about America. I wouldn't love it enough to put this time and effort in if I didn't think a whole lot of America. But I don't believe our values can be spread at the point of a gun. I just don't think. If we as Americans believe in our system, and we do, and we believe in the goodness of freedom, then what we should do is strive to improve ourselves, personally, our families, our friends, our neighbors, and our country. Provide the conditions of freedom and free markets and prosperity, and then be willing to help other countries in a voluntary manner. In the sort of the economic missionary spirit, yes, we will help others and we'll educate and tell you how this is, but they have to want to emulate us. It cannot be done by force, and I think that's where the most serious error has been. But not only will they twist that logic about saying that if you're not for the war, you don't like the troops. It is also this thing related to the 9/11, and that was the little rhubarb that was stirred up the other night, because my position has been for a good many years, since I've been in politics for 30 years, and that little book on foreign policy actually have statements that I've made in the last 30 years on the advocacy of a non-interventionist foreign policy, and why it's good for freedom, and really the only foreign policy for freedom. And so I've written about it and I've talked about it, but it didn't come out of my own head. It came out of the study of history and also current events, and from people who have a lot more experience than I do on how our policies come back to haunt us. And that's what Americans, some Americans don't want to hear. And then the proponents of the war and the neocons want to say, once again, you don't support the troops. Oh, you said America, and that's what he tried to make me say. He said, you're blaming America. You're blaming the Americans and that we deserved it. And that's preposterous. To be willing to criticize those 25 neocons who gave us a foreign policy I didn't like, is it un-American for me to criticize that policy and point out the shortcomings? But that is actually was an issue that is not going to go. It is an issue that will not go away easily, which is fine, because foreign policy was one of my driving issues that prompted me to be willing to make a commitment here in the campaign. So this will be fully debated, and I hope we've served a very beneficial purpose by calling attention to this issue, because it is the policy. For them to turn around and say to us, if we would like to, that our foreign policy comes back to haunt us, and we use the CIA term of blowback, this just means that they're not willing to face up to the fact that they're saying to us that if they claim that I'm blaming America, I'm an American, I'm not blaming myself. You're an American, I'm not blaming you. We're in many ways a victim of all this. But this is demagoguery, and this is the way politics works. They try to turn and twist things around. But you know, I'm a strong believer that the truth wins out in the end. And you know, the issue back again on the foreign policy and the whole idea about how 9/11 was a consequence of our foreign policy, I think this is very, very real. And that, of course, I explained, is far from blaming America, it's blaming that policy. We first went into the Middle East in a significant manner in 1953. And that's when our CIA went in and overthrew an elected leader. His name was Mossadegh, Mohammed Mossadegh, who happened to have been a physician. And he was going to, I think the British and the Americans were taking like 98% of the wealth, of the oil wealth out. And he was going to change that. And maybe he was going to change it in an imperfect fashion, but it was their country. So we didn't like that, so we got rid of him and we put the Shah in. The Shah was not a champion of civil liberties, let me tell you, and a lot of abuse. Americans have long ago forgotten about that, but believe me, Arabs and Muslims and Persians don't forget, and they knew about it, and it was directly related to the taking our hostages in 1979. So, and then during the 80s, what did we do? We were giving weapons to Saddam Hussein. He became our ally. So we were giving him weapons and actually gave him some, the facilities for gas, and we encouraged him to invade Iran. And you wonder, what if somebody had done that to us? You know, it's not un-American to suggest that. You know, what they like to say, oh no, don't suggest that. That sounds like you don't care about America. Yeah, I care about America, and that's why I'm telling it as it is. What if the Russians were doing in Mexico and Canada what we're doing right up at their borders? And what would we've surrounded Iran. I mean, I will not defend them and their leaders and all the bad stuff, but I can talk about what we're dealing with, a difficult problem. We're just making it worse. We've invaded 2 countries on each side of Iran, and we have battleships, two aircraft carriers. We're sending a 3rd one over there. We get our vice president out there threatening them. I mean, we're just looking for trouble. And not only is the debate in Washington not proceeding all that well, in spite of the election and the American people saying we've had enough of this, we had a bill put into the supplemental, in a bill that I was a co-sponsor of, and I was restating the Constitution, and that says that you can't go into Iran unless you ask the Congress. You can't go start another war. And that was quietly removed from the bill by the Democratic leadership because it was offensive to one particular country in the Middle East. They said they didn't want it in there. This very week, we had that same amendment, very, very similar, come up on the House floor. I was a co-sponsor of the amendment with a Democrat, and it said the same thing. We can't start a war without congressional approval of this. And out of the 435, we got 136 votes that said that the president ought to ask us before we go to war against Iran. Now that's sad. That's sad because that can get out of hand. Can you imagine what's going to happen if a ship is hit over there, or accidentally or on purpose by somebody, and 200 or 300 or 400 Americans are killed? I am just so afraid that we're going to have that war massively spread throughout the Middle East. There are all kinds of weapons over there left over from the Soviet Union. We are bosom buddies with Musharraf in Pakistan. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. Once they get nuclear weapons, we give them money. Where do you think Osama bin Laden is? In Pakistan.